Helen Amelia Thomas was an American author and news service reporter, member of the White House press corps and opinion columnist. She worked for the United Press and post-1958 successor United Press International for 57 years, first as a correspondent, and later as White House bureau manager. She was a columnist for Hearst Newspapers from 2000 to 2010, writing on national affairs and the White House. She covered the administrations of 11 U.S. presidents from the final years of the Eisenhower administration to the second year of the Obama administration. Thomas was the first female officer of the National Press Club, the first female member and president of the White House Correspondents Association and the first female member of the Gridiron Club. She wrote 6 books. Her last, with co-author Craig Crawford, was Listen Up, Mr. President, Everything You Always Wanted Your President to Know and Do. Thomas retired from Hearst Newspapers on June 7, 2010, following controversial comments she made about Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Early life and education. Born in Winchester, Kentucky, Thomas was the 7th of the 9 children of George and Mary Thomas, immigrants from Tripoli in what was, at the time, part of the Ottoman Empire. Thomas has said her father's surname, Antonius, was anglicized to Thomas, when he entered the U.S. at Ellis Island, and that her parents could neither read nor write. Thomas was raised mainly in Detroit, Michigan, where her family moved when she was 4 years old, and where her father ran a grocery store. Of her experience growing up, Thomas has said, "We were never hyphenated as Arab Americans. We were American, and I have always rejected the hyphen, and I believe all assimilated immigrants should not be designated ethnically or separated, of course, by race or creed either. These are trends that ever try to divide us as a people." She has also said that in Detroit in the 1920s, she came home crying from school, "They wanted to make you feel you weren't American. We were called garlic eaters." She was a member of the Anchachian Orthodox Church. Thomas attended public schools, and decided to become a journalist while in high school. She enrolled at Wayne University in Detroit, receiving a bachelor's degree in English in 1942, as the school did not yet offer a degree in journalism. Early career. Thomas moved to Washington, D.C. Her first job in journalism was as a copy girl for the now-defunct Washington Daily News. After 8 months at the paper, she joined with her colleagues in a strike action and was fired. Thomas joined United Press in 1943 and reported on women's topics for its radio wire service, earning $24 a week. Her first assignments focused her on societal issues, women's news and celebrity profiles. Later in the decade, and in the early 50s, she wrote UP's names in the news column, for which she interviewed numerous Washington celebrities. In 1955, she was assigned to cover the United States Department of Justice. She later was assigned to cover other agencies, including the United States Department of Health, as well as Capitol Hill. Thomas served as president of the Women's National Press Club from 1959 through 1960. In 1959, she and a few of her fellow female journalists forced the National Press Club, then barred to women, to allow them to attend an address by Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. Presidential correspondent. In November 1960, Thomas began covering then-President-elect John F. Kennedy, taking the initiative to switch from reporting the women's angle to reporting the news of the day. She became the White House UPI correspondent in January 1961. Thomas became known as the Sitting Buddha, and the First Lady of the Press. It was during Kennedy's administration that she began ending presidential press conferences with a signature "Thank you, Mr. President," reviving a tradition started by UPI's Albert Merriman Smith during the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt. In a 2008 article, the Christian Science Monitor wrote, "Thomas, a fixture in American politics, is outspoken, blunt, demanding, forceful and unrelenting. Not only does she command respect by the highest powers in the U.S., her reputation is known worldwide." When Cuban leader Fidel Castro was asked in the early 2000s what was the difference between democracy in Cuba and democracy in the United States, Castro reportedly replied, "I don't have to answer questions from Helen Thomas." Thomas considered Castro's reply to be the height of flattery. In 1962, Thomas convinced President Kennedy to not attend the annual dinners held for the White House correspondents and photographers if they disallowed women from attending. President Kennedy moved for the dinners to be combined into one event, with women allowed to attend. In 1970, UPI named Thomas their chief White House correspondent, making her the first woman to serve in the position. She was named the chief of UPI's White House Bureau in 1974. Thomas was the only female print journalist to travel to China with President Richard Nixon during his 1972 visit to China. During the Watergate scandal, Martha Beall Mitchell, wife of United States Attorney General John N. Mitchell, frequently called Thomas to discuss how the Nixon administration was using Mitchell as a scapegoat. Thomas circled the globe several times, traveling with every U.S. president from Richard Nixon through Barack Obama. She covered every economic summit since 1975, working up to the position of UPI's White House bureau chief, a post she would hold for over 25 years. While serving as White House bureau chief, she authored a regular column for UPI, Backstairs at the White House. The column provided an insider's view of various presidential administrations. In 1975, the Washington Press Corps Club, known as the Gridiron Club, admitted Thomas, making her the first woman to become a member. From 1975 through 1976, she served as the first female president of the White House Correspondents Association. Thomas was the only member of the White House press corps to have her own seat in the White House briefing room. All other seats are assigned to media outlets. In 1979, the Super Sisters trading card set was produced and distributed. One of the cards featured Thomas's name and picture. Departure from UPI. On May 17, 2000, the day after it was announced that the UPI had been acquired by News World Communications Incorporated, an international media conglomerate founded and controlled by Unification Church leader Reverend Sun Myung Moon, which owns the Washington Times and other news media, Thomas resigned from the UPI after 57 years with the organization. She later described the change in ownership as a bridge too far. Less than 2 months later, she joined Hearst Newspapers as an opinion columnist, writing on national affairs and the White House. After leaving her job as a reporter at the UPI, Thomas became more likely to air her personal, negative views. In a speech at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she quipped, "I censored myself for 50 years when I was a reporter. Now I wake up and ask myself, who do I hate today?" George W. Bush administration. During President George W. Bush's first term, Thomas reacted to Press Secretary Ari Fleischer's statements about arms shipments to the terrorists by asking, "Where do the Israelis get their arms?" He responded, "There's a difference, Helen, and that is." "What is the difference?" she asked. He responded, "The targeting of innocents through the use of terror, which is a common enemy for Yasser Arafat and for the people of Israel, as well as." She interrupted him, saying, "Palestinian people are fighting for their land." He responded, "I think that the killing of innocents is a category entirely different. Justifying killing of innocents for land is an argument in support of terrorism." In January 2003, following a speech at a Society of Professional Journalists banquet, Thomas told an autograph seeker, "I'm covering the worst president in American history." The autograph seeker was a sports writer for the Daily Breeze, and her comments were published. After that, she was not called upon during a press conference for the first time in over 4 decades. She wrote to the president to apologize. Traditionally, Thomas sat in the front row and asked the first question during White House press conferences. However, according to Thomas in a 2006 Daily Show interview, this ended because she no longer represented a wire service. During the Bush administration, Thomas was moved to the back row during press conferences. She was called upon at briefings on a daily basis but no longer ended presidential news conferences saying, "Thank you, Mr. President." When asked why she was seated in the black row, she said, "They didn't like me. I asked too mean questions." On March 21, 2006, Thomas was called upon directly by President Bush for the first time in 3 years. Thomas asked Bush about the war in Iraq. "I'd like to ask you, Mr. President, about your decision to invade Iraq. Every reason given, publicly at least, has turned out not to be true. My question is, why did you really want to go to war? You have said it wasn't oil. Quest for oil, it hasn't been Israel, or anything else. What was it?" Bush responded by discussing the war on terror, and stated as a reason for the invasion that Saddam Hussein chose to deny inspectors and not to disclose required information. Thomas was criticized by some commentators for her exchange with Bush. In July 2006, she told The Hill, "The day Dick Cheney is going to run for president, I'll kill myself. All we need is another liar. I think he'd like to run, but it would be a sad day for the country if he does." At the July 18, 2006, White House press briefing, Thomas remarked, "The United States could have stopped the bombardment of Lebanon. We have that much control with the Israelis. We have gone for collective punishment against all of Lebanon and Palestine." Press Secretary Tony Snow responded, "Thank you for the Hezbollah view." Other members of the press weighed in. According to Washington Post television critic Tom Shales, questions like the one above have sounded more like tirades and anti-Israeli rhetoric. In a press conference on November 30, 2007, Thomas questioned White House Press Secretary Dana Perino as to why Americans should depend on General David Petraeus in determining when to redeploy U.S. troops from Iraq. Perino began to answer when Thomas interjected with, "You mean how many more people we kill?" Perino immediately took offense, responding, "Helen, I find it really unfortunate that you use your front row position, bestowed upon you by your colleagues, to make such statements. It is an honor and a privilege to be in the briefing room, and to suggest that we, the United States, are killing innocent people is just absurd and very offensive." Refusing to back down, Thomas responded immediately by asking Perino if she knew how many innocent Iraqis had been killed, and then questioned the worth of regret when Perino responded that the administration regretted the loss of all innocent Iraqi lives. Obama administration equals. On February 9, 2009, Thomas was present in the front row for newly elected President Obama's first news conference. President Obama called on her with the statement, "Helen, I'm excited, this is my inaugural moment," seemingly a reference to her long-term presence in the White House press corps. Thomas asked if any Middle Eastern country possessed nuclear weapons. Obama replied that he did not want to speculate on the matter. On July 1, 2009, Thomas commented on the Obama administration's handling of the press, "We have had some control but not this control. I mean, I'm amazed at you people who call for openness and transparency, and you have controlled." She also said that not even Richard Nixon tried to control the press as much as President Obama. On August 4, 2009, Thomas celebrated her 89th birthday. President Obama, whose birthday is on the same day, presented Thomas with birthday cupcakes and sang happy birthday to her before that day's press conference. Resignation equals, Rabbi David Nisanov of RabbiLive.com, on the White House grounds with his son and a teenage friend for a May 27, 2010, American Jewish Heritage Celebration Day, questioned Thomas as she was leaving the White House via the North Lawn driveway. When asked for comments on Israel, she replied, "Tell them to get the hell out of Palestine. And remember, these people are occupied and it's their land. It's not German, it's not Poland." When asked where Israeli Jews should go, she replied they could go home to Poland or Germany or America and everywhere else. Why push people out of there who have lived there for centuries? She also mentioned she was of Arab background. A 1-minute excerpt of the May 27, 2010, interview was posted on Nisanov's website on June 3. On June 4, Thomas posted the following response on her website. "I deeply regret my comments I made last week regarding the Israelis and the Palestinians. They do not reflect my heartfelt belief that peace will come to the Middle East only when all parties recognize the need for mutual respect and tolerance. May that day come soon." Thomas's agency, 9 Speakers, Incorporated, immediately dropped her as a client because of her remarks. Craig Crawford, who co-authored Listen Up, Mr. President, said I will no longer be working with Helen on our book projects. Her scheduled delivery of a commencement speech at Walt Whitman High School in Bethesda, Maryland, was cancelled by the school. The White House Correspondents Association, over which he once presided, issued a statement calling her remarks indefensible. In January 2011, the Society of Professional Journalists voted to retire the Helen Thomas Award for Lifetime Achievement. On June 7, Thomas abruptly tendered her resignation from Hearst Newspapers. The next day, in an interview on NBC's Today Show, President Obama called her remarks offensive and out of line, and said her retirement was the right decision. He remarked that it was a shame her celebrated career had to end in such controversy, and at the same time he recognized her long service covering U.S. presidents, calling her a real institution in Washington. Her comments also garnered rebukes from numerous others, including White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs, former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer, former Special Counsel and White House spokesman for President Bill Clinton, Lanny Davis, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee and Hoover Institution Senior Fellow Victor Davis Hanson. Thomas also had her share of defenders who felt she was being attacked too harshly, including former presidential candidate Ralph Nader, Fox News contributor Ellen Ratner, former UPI managing editor Michael Friedman and The Nation editor and publisher Katrina vanden Heuvel. Nader noted the double standard, where one off-and ill-conceived remark ended Helen Thomas' career while ultra-right-wing radio and cable ranters engaged in bigotry, stereotypes and falsehoods directed wholesale against Muslims, including a blatant anti-Semitism against Arabs. Thomas said in an October 2011 radio interview with Scott Spears of WMRN that she realized soon after making the comments that she would be fired, stating, "I hit the third rail. You cannot criticize Israel in this country and survive." She added that she issued an apology because people were upset, but that ultimately, she still had the same feelings about Israel's aggression and brutality. Later career. 2010 speech on Arab Americans on December 2, 2010, shortly before a speech for the 8th Annual Images and Perceptions of Arab Americans Conference in Dearborn, Michigan, Thomas told reporters that she still stood by the comments she had made to Nisenov. Referring to her resignation, she said, "I paid a price, but it's worth it to speak the truth." During the speech, Thomas said, "Congress, the White House, Hollywood and Wall Street are owned by Zionists. No question, in my opinion." Thomas defended her comments on December 7, telling Scott Spears of Marion, Ohio radio station WMRN, "I just think that people should be enlightened as to who is in charge of the opinion in this country." The next day, the Anti-Defamation League called for journalism schools and organizations to rescind any honors given to Thomas. The organization said that Thomas had clearly, unequivocally revealed herself as a vulgar anti-Semite in the speech. Hours later, Wayne State University in Detroit discontinued the Helen Thomas Spirit of Diversity in Media Award, which it had been granting for more than 10 years, citing what it called her anti-Semitic remarks. Thomas reacted with scolding remarks, saying that the leaders of Wayne State University have made a mockery of the First Amendment and disgrace their understanding of its inherent freedom of speech and the press. Asked by the Detroit Free Press how she would respond to people who say she is anti-Semitic, Thomas responded, "I'd say I'm a Semite." "What are you talking about?" Subsequent employment Thomas was employed as a weekly columnist by the Virginia Falls Church News Press from January 2011 to January 2012. Owner-editor Nicholas Benton repeatedly defended the decision to hire her despite her controversial comments. He noted in 2011 that he was outraged when the Society of Professional Journalists voted on retiring a scholarship award named for Thomas. Benton said that Thomas is herself a Semite, and was expressing a political point of view, in the interview with Nisenov above, and not a bigoted racial sentiment. During her time on the paper's roster, Thomas contributed very little, as most of the editorial space went to reprints of journalists such as Maureen Dowd and David Brooks. Personal life. Thomas described herself as a liberal. For most of her adult life, she chose her work over her personal life. At age 51, Thomas married a colleague, Douglas Cornell, who was just retiring as the White House reporter for the Associated Press. 4 years later he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and she cared for him until his death in 1982. Death: Thomas died on July 20, 2013, at her home in Washington, D.C. at the age of 92, 2 weeks short of her 93rd birthday. Many female journalists memorialized Thomas on Twitter, including Judy Woodruff, who called her a trailblazer, and Lynn Sweet, who said she was a glass-ceiling-breaking journalist. Andrea Mitchell tweeted that Thomas made it possible for all of us who followed. Dana Perino, who served as press secretary to President George W. Bush, remembered that on her first day as press secretary, Thomas approached her to give her words of encouragement. President Obama released a statement calling her a true pioneer, and that she never failed to keep presidents myself included on their toes. Thomas was cremated and her ashes were buried in Detroit, following a traditional Anchachian Orthodox funeral service. Awards: Thomas received numerous awards and more than 30 honorary degrees. In 1976, Thomas was named one of the World Almanac's 25 most influential women in America. In 1986 she received the William Allen White Foundation Award for Journalistic Merit from the University of Kansas. Thomas received an Al Newharth Award for Excellence in the Media from the Freedom Forum in 1991. The White House Correspondents Association honored her in 1998 by establishing the Helen Thomas Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2000, her alma mater, Wayne State University, established an award for journalists in her honor, the Helen Thomas Spirit of Diversity Award. In December 2010, the award was discontinued by Wayne State, which cited her renewed remarks similar to those in May 2010. Speaking for Wayne State, Matthew Seeger, its interim dean, said that the award is given to promote the importance of diversity in the media and that this award is no longer helping us achieve our goals. In 2007, Thomas received a Faux Mother Award from the National Research Center for Women and Families. In October 2010, the Council on American-Islamic Relations honored Thomas with a Lifetime Achievement Award. In April 2012, Thomas received an award from the Palestine Liberation Organization's General Mission to the United States. The award was presented by PLO Executive Committee member Hanan Ashrawi to recognize Thomas' long career in the field of journalism, during which he defended the Palestinian position every step of the way. Bibliography: Listen Up Mr. President, Everything You Always Wanted Your President to Know and Do. ISBN 1-4391-4815-5, The Great White House Breakout. ISBN 978-0-8037-3300-8, Watchdogs of Democracy. The Waning Washington Press Corps and How It Has Failed the Public. ISBN 0-7432-6781-8, Thanks for the Memories, Mr. President, Wit and Wisdom from the Front Row at the White House. ISBN 0-7432-0226-0, Front Row at the White House, My Life and Times. ISBN 0-684-86809-1, Dateline, White House. ISBN 0-02-617620-3. See also: Criticism of the Israeli government, Women in Journalism and Media Professions. References. External links: Helen Thomas at the Internet Movie Database, Helen Thomas collected news and commentary at the New York Times, works by or about Helen Thomas in libraries, Magda Abu Fadl. Happy Birthday Helen. Huffington Post. Michael Sneed. Where is Helen Thomas? Chicago Sun-Times. Radio Live New Zealand interview with Helen Thomas. Radio Live New Zealand. June 15, 2010. Elders Part 4 Helen Thomas. July 7, 2008. David Chambers. Calling Helen Thomas 57. Saudi Aramco World. Discusses Thomas' impact on younger Arab American journalists. Truth, Fear and War, speech by Thomas, September 13, 2003. Oral history interview with Helen Thomas, from the Lyndon Baines Johnson Library, October 2010 interview of Helen Thomas by Scott Spears, Helen Thomas at Find a Grave.